If you're joining us late, my name is Brady, and I'm a follower of Jesus. I say that a lot, and some of you may wonder why I do that, because I need a continual reminder personally that is my main identifier, that's who I am, that I am a follower of Jesus first and foremost. And I want to remind everyone else that that's who I am. That's where my identity is anchored in hopes that that's where all of our identities would be anchored in. As I was wrestling through what we would do this morning, what we'd talk about in light of things getting more and more, difficult, fearful, confusing, frustrating, angering, I was reminded of my story, and I was thinking about how I don't think I've ever really told my story about how I've became a pastor, how Jennifer and I got to Quincy, Illinois. And so this is part one. It's part one of how we came to be here. And I think it's going to be really relevant to what we're talking about right now. Jennifer and I, 10, 12 years ago, we were musicians. So we used to travel around and trick people into buying our CDs and merchandise. It was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it. Most of it, I think. Jennifer used to make the T-shirts that we would sell. She would buy T-shirts, and then she would get these stencils, and she would get bleach, and she would do all kind of crazy things. And we would I remember we just had a giant pile of T-shirts on our table after we get finished playing, and just sell them out of a pile. And somehow that's how we were able to make ends meet, and we were able to do ministry. It was a really unique time. And then I just remember, and I'll never forget it. I was in my office working. I don't know if I was trying to write songs or record or design stuff. I don't know what I was trying to do, but I was in my office, and Jennifer came down, and she kind of had this odd look on her face, and I was like, okay, what's going on? And she said, I think God is calling me to work at Disney World. And I thought to myself, are they building a Disney park in Branson, Missouri? Because that's where we lived at the time. I thought, well, how is he calling you to be a Disney cast member when, we live in Branson and we're musicians? What does that mean? And 1,000 things went through my mind. And a thought occurred to me. I remember when I was dating Jen, we were talking about different things that we liked, different things that we enjoyed. And at one point she said, I love Disney. And I thought, wow, I appreciate Disney too. I grew up watching, The Little Mermaid and Lion King, Aladdin. I loved those movies. They were great. They were enjoyable. They were fun for a time as a kid. And I thought that when she said, I really love Disney, that meant that one day, when we had kids, that we would go on vacation to Walt Disney World, and we would enjoy that. And maybe we would do it because she loved it. Maybe we would do that more often, like every 5 years or something like that. Little did I know that was not what she meant. She had a deep passion for the Walt Disney World Company and for cast members in general. And for some reason, while we were doing music, that didn't fill the void that was in her heart, that God had laid on her heart for cast members. Now, I didn't know all of this at the time. And so I said to her, okay, why don't we take a month and pray about this? And honestly, I think I was trying to, give her a really hard task so that she would kind of get bored with it and she would stop praying about it and we wouldn't have to go. We wouldn't have to leave. Because what I didn't know about my wife was she has the gift of perseverance, like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it is amazing. When she decides something in her heart, it's almost like she's seen the future, like it has already happened and there's no swaying. But I didn't know this. So I said, why don't you pray about it for about a month? Thinking she'd get bored, she'd lose interest, and she'd stop, and we'd get to continue doing what we were doing in Branson, Missouri. That was not the case. My wife took it very seriously. She ended up having this place. We lived kind of in the woods, and there was a river about 100, 200 yards away. And so she would walk down to the river almost every day, and she would pray. And a month into it, once again, I was in my office, and she came to my office, and she said, I've been praying about it. And I thought, oh no. And I had also been praying about it too, so I kind of knew this was coming. And she said, I really believe God is calling us to go to Disney and to work there and be a part of that company. And so I was a little taken aback because she wasn't excited. She wasn't super happy because I thought, this is what you want. Why aren't you happy? Why aren't you excited? What's going on in your heart, in your mind? And she said, well, I just thought God would put a Mickey in the clouds. And so I said, did you look? And she said, well, no. I said, well, why don't you go out and look? And I stayed in my office, and she went outside, and 5 minutes later, she came back with tears in her eyes, and she said, there was a Mickey Mouse head in the clouds. And I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know what she saw. I know that you can see a lot of things in the clouds, but I believe that she actually saw a Mickey head in the clouds. And that was God being super kind to us in doing something powerful for us that we needed so that we could have the faith to step out and leave what we knew. And so we decided to move to California. And the reason we decided to move to California, because I told Jennifer I would never live in Florida. I said, that's fine, you can work for Disney, but I'm not gonna live in Florida. I don't wanna go to Florida. It's hot and it's humid all the time. And so I'd like to go to California. So she said, okay. And so we did something really foolish, is we just packed up our house and we moved to California. And the reason I say that was foolish is because that was in the year 2010. This was in the great recession starting from 2008, where basically everybody was on a hiring freeze. Nobody was hiring. Disney was not hiring. They were on a literal hiring freeze, so they were not hiring. And so we decided to go to California at that time. She went out there to get a job at Disney, and I went out there to continue to be a musician because that's what I had done for the last 10 years. It's all that I had known, and I really enjoyed it. There was something about it that was just spoke powerfully to, I think, the way that I was created. And so we went out there, just went out there. And it was not easy. First of all, Jen wasn't able to get a job at Disney. She talks about this. She wrote a book called Be Love, and she talks about this in the book. She recounts, what happened, how she would go to the casting office on, I think, Tuesdays and Thursdays, twice a week. I don't remember what days they were, but twice a week for a month. And she got turned down every single time until a month into it. And where she started, even before she got that job at Disney, she started scooping ice cream at Haagen-Dazs and selling shoes at Sanuk. And so a couple weeks into our adventure in California, she was working minimum wage at Sanuk and at Haagen-Dazs, and I was trying to be a musician. Well, the major problem with that is I had no contacts in California. And if you know about being a musician or doing things like that, you know that connections and networking is everything, right? You have to have some sort of connection because everybody is trying to be famous. Everybody's trying to be a musician. Everyone had their own MySpace page with their music on it, with Tom as their best friend. That was the world that we lived in. And so when I went to California, it was super hard. And not just because I didn't have any contacts, but there was something else going on. And when I describe it to people, I like to tell them, there was a spiritual barrier for me to pursue music. There was something more than just the inability to have contacts. There was something internal. There was something God was doing inside that was keeping me from pursuing music, which was really hard because I was 31 years old at the time. That's really all I had known. I was a computer tech for a while, but I knew that was not for me. I was not great at that. And so I was in this place where I was questioning who I was, where my identity was, where my value was. On top of that, I was unemployed. Jen was working minimum wage. We were living in California where it is incredibly expensive. Super expensive, more than we could have even imagined. And so our bank account that we had been saving up was dwindling down to nothing, and it was terrifying. It was incredibly scary. I began having lots of conversations with wise men and women. I began praying a lot about what was God doing in my heart? What was he calling me to do? And through a lot of conversations, through a lot of prayer, I really believed wholeheartedly that God was calling me to be a teaching pastor. That's what God was doing. I was thinking through, why did I love music so much? What was it about music that I really loved? And honestly, it wasn't because I was creating good art. I don't know, maybe some people would have thought I was creating good art. When I evaluated, honestly, I don't know that I was. But really what it was is I had a message that was on my heart that I felt compelled to share, something that I believe God had laid on my heart. And through writing and performing and sharing the stories behind the songs, that's what I was doing. I was one of those people that if I played in a coffee shop and no one was listening, I hated it. Some people can do that. They love it because they're just creating art. Like they're just being an artist, and it's fine if people are listening or not listening. For me, I hated it because people needed to be paying attention to what I was trying to communicate. And it was through that and through conversations and through, I had gone to seminary a number of years before. A number of things just kind of fell into place, and I realized that's what I was called to do. And so I thought, well, I know what I'm called to do, so I started applying to churches in the area for teaching pastor jobs. And apparently no one wanted to hire a teaching pastor that had no teaching experience, right? I'd never taught anything ever before. Shocking. No one wanted to hire a teaching pastor. And so I expanded the search to, surrounding areas and even further, just kind of looking online and job searching. Anyone would hire a teaching pastor, and no one wanted to hire me. And so I thought, okay, that's fine. Maybe I'll have to start, I'll start in a different place. So I applied for associate pastor jobs. I applied for, discipleship pastor jobs. I applied for youth pastor jobs. I applied for student ministry, kids ministry jobs, anything that I could apply for at a church. And no one wanted to hire me. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to apply for some internships. And so I applied for a number of internships, and no one wanted to hire me for one of their internships. And finally, I decided to go out for an unpaid internship at the church that we were faithfully a part of. And I filled out my application. I went into an interview, and they did not want to hire me for an unpaid internship. And let me tell you, there are few things more humbling than someone telling you, I don't want you to be here for free. I don't want you to be here for free. That there weren't enough gifts and talents in me that anyone could recognize that they even wanted me to just be hanging around the church. And they weren't even under quarantine. Like they weren't even trying to limit the number of people that were in their building. This was a giant church. Oh, that was so hard. Like I can't even convey to you how difficult that was, what a shot that was to my pride, to my identity, to my value and my worth. It was so hard. It was one of the most low times in my walk with Jesus. And a couple things happened. One thing is Jennifer and I began to fight a lot, and mainly about money, which was a little odd for me because I had never thought that money had any sort of hold over my heart or my mind. Like that had never been a thing for me. I always thought I was able to be generous. I thought I had great trust to God and his provision for me. But when we began to fight a lot about money, I realized that greed had a hold of my heart. That lack of trust in God's provision had a hold of my heart, but I just didn't know it because we were provided for. See, when we had money, greed had a hold of my heart. And when we had money, lack of trust in God had a hold of my heart, but I just didn't know it. See, it was covered over because there was this pad of a bank account and some savings that made me feel comfortable. But when that stuff was taken away, I realized that my heart was exposed and I was enslaved to sin. And what else began to happen besides me fighting a lot with my wife is I began to fight a lot with God. I began to have some really hard conversations with God. I began to be very frustrated with God, to be very angry with God. In fact, there was a time that I got into a shouting match with God. I was angry with God. I was screaming at him. I was so mad that he would lead me here, that he would call me to be a pastor, that he wouldn't provide for me, that he wouldn't allow me to take care of my family. I was so angry at God. I even used words that I'm ashamed of towards God. It was one of the lowest moments in my life. But what happened is God used this scenario, these situations, to expose what was really going on inside my heart that I had no clue of. I had no idea of the pride that was in my heart. I had no idea about the greed that was in my heart. I had no idea about my identity tied to what I did, my value tied to what I did, to who I impressed, to how people thought of me. And when you've been unemployed for 6-7 months, and your wife has been providing for your family with a minimum wage job, and your savings has gone down to basically nothing, and no one wants to hire you. In fact, your church family doesn't even want you around for free. There is a revealing of what's going on inside that is painful. It's scary. Even as I recount this, I'm starting to feel like this pit in my stomach. I'm getting there a little bit. But there was a great beauty in what God did through these circumstances. Is he revealed what I had no idea was going on. And God was saying to me, I don't want you to be partially complete. I don't want you to be partially free. I want you to be completely free, not enslaved to anything. I want your whole heart. I want your whole trust. I want a deep, intimate relationship with you. And he had to do this to get me to a place where I was able to be useful to his kingdom, to a place where I was actually willing to move to Florida. Jen, right about that time that I didn't get that unpaid internship, she got the opportunity of a lifetime to go do the job of her dreams in Florida. And by that time, God had done enough in my heart that I was willing to go across the country to a place I didn't want to be so that my wife could have the job of her dreams. And then he got me to a place that when I got to Florida and this church offered me a $500 a month paid internship, I was so grateful. I couldn't believe it. I was elated. I was so thankful that they would be willing to pay me $500 a month to be an intern with them so that they could train me so that I could become a teaching pastor, so that I could become any kind of pastor. I was just super excited to get to be a part of a place that wanted me, that saw value in me, that saw worth in me, that saw potential in me. And God needed to work on my heart. He needed to do all of the things that he did so that I could be in this place where I could be useful to his kingdom, where I could be much more deeply intimate with him. And as I look back on that time, although it was extremely difficult and I wouldn't want to go through it again, it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. You know, in the scriptures, in the book of James, we see this. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4. James, he was the half-brother of Jesus. And he writes this. This is after Jesus has risen from the grave and he's ascended into heaven. And the church has come on hard times. In fact, this famine had gone out throughout the land. And the church, particularly in Jerusalem, was suffering greatly. A lot of poverty was going on. And people were hungry. People were scared for their lives. A lot of persecution had happened. And here's what he says. He says, "Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know," right? Count it all joy when you're in the midst of suffering and trials, which is not what we would think, right? When things go horribly wrong, be joyful. Really? Really? When you don't get an unpaid internship, count it all joy. When your savings account has gone to zero, count it all joy. When you've been unemployed for 6 months, count it all joy. I can't imagine, like, reading this at that time. I was like, God, seriously? Joy? Are you kidding me? Joy? But James says, because you know something. Because there's something that followers of Jesus know. There's something that we have deeply ingrained in the core of our being as men and women who've been invited into God's family, who are God's children. We know something. And here's what we know. We know that the testing of our faith produces endurance. It produces steadfastness. It produces steadfastness. And he says, now allow steadfastness to have its full effect. Now, we don't want steadfastness to have its full effect. Come on. We want to have a little bit of steadfastness, right? Patience for a day, right? God, okay, I'm gonna wait on you for a day. You know, we'll be quarantined for a day, maybe a week, right? I cannot work for a week and like, okay, I can do that, but I don't want it to go on and go on and go on. I don't want the stock market to continue to be where it is and my investments to be as depleted as they are for very long. I don't know that I want to go through the fullness of the trials because I don't really want steadfastness to have its full effect. I want it to have a little bit of effect, but I don't know about its full effect. But James says, no, let it have its full effect. Why? So that we may be perfect. And the word there is perfectly mature. That we might be grown up into maturity, perfectly mature and complete, lacking nothing. James says, don't you understand what trials will do? The full extent of trials will do, what persecution will do, what suffering will do. They will have their full effect, and we will be mature and complete, lacking nothing. And I want that, but I don't know if I want the fullness of the trials and the fullness of steadfastness, because it's hard. And I think what James is talking about is he's saying what the enemy intends for evil, God wants for our good. That what the enemy does to destroy, when the enemy creates suffering, God sees an opportunity for fullness, for maturity, for completion, and for freedom. When the enemy creates disaster, God sees opportunity for us to be more like Jesus. That was hugely powerful for me during that time. Now, here's what Proverbs says. Proverbs says that, like James, difficult times reveal what's going on under the surface. In Proverbs chapter 4:19, it says this: the way of the wicked is like deep darkness, but they do not know over what they stumble. Have you ever woke up in the middle of the night? As I get older, I have to get up to go to the bathroom more often. And I do this thing because if I wake up, then I'm done for the night. Like it's over. And so I do my best to like try and stay asleep, and I slowly get out of bed. I keep my eyes like really closed as much as possible, and I don't want to turn on any lights. And so I kind of walk, and then we have this bed that there's this, on the end of it, there's this thing that sticks out. And I can't tell you how many times I have bruised my leg from hitting it on that, or stubbed my toe on something that I left out. And it's so frustrating. But when it's dark and you're not looking, you don't see these things. You don't know what you stumble over. And here's the deal. He's talking about the wicked, those who don't follow in Jesus' footsteps, those who are doing their own thing. He's saying there's this veil of darkness over, and we don't even know what we're stumbling over. That there's stuff in the way, but we don't know it. There are things that are a problem. There are things that are an issue, but we just don't know it. We don't see it. Right? We don't see that our heart is enslaved to greed. We don't see that our heart is enslaved to lust, enslaved to pride, that our identity is tied up in what we do or who we impress. We don't see it because we're fine. We're in the dark. And the light exposes all of the obstacles that we have to work through, that we have to deal with. And it's not easy, but it's good. Have you ever been in the dark and someone just flips on the light and you're like, oh, stop. Sometimes that's what it's like. But isn't it better to be in the light where you see the obstacles, where you see the slaveries on your heart? That's what Proverbs is saying. That's what James is saying. Here's what Paul says in Galatians. Actually, before we do that, this is over the last couple of days. Here's a way that this has worked out in my life. I think I'm typically a pretty patient person. Nice alliteration. Pretty patient person. Yes, consonants, all those kind of English things. It's good. Anyway, over the last couple of days, I have noticed that I have been really short with my wife. And I'm 6'3", and so for me to be short, that's a big deal. Dad joke alert. We could maybe, whatever. Anyway, so I've been really short with her, and yesterday, there were a couple times that I kind of lashed out at her a little bit, and this was kind of the biggest one. We were driving together, and here's something about me, and it's kind of embarrassing, but when I'm driving, a lot of times I'll start preaching to myself. I'll be thinking about the message that's coming up. And so I'll start thinking in my head, what am I going to say? How is this going to connect? And I'll start using my hands, and I'll start moving my mouth. And my wife knows it, right? She recognizes it immediately. Isn't that just like, the people that are closest to you, like they recognize these things about you that are embarrassing, and sometimes they'll point it out. They'll kind of expose that, and normally that's fine. When she kind of pokes fun at me doing that, that's totally fine. Like, obviously, it's silly that I'm moving my hands in the car, and I'm acting like I'm teaching. Like, it's kind of silly that I'm doing that. But yesterday, she did it. She kind of pointed out, and I got super embarrassed. I mean, extremely embarrassed. And I got angry, and so I committed the ultimate sin. I tickled her. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, tickling, that's flirting. No, it is not. Tickling is not flirting, okay? There is nothing that angers my wife more than tickling, and a certain kind of tickling. When I was a kid, my dad used to do this thing. He called it the flying eagle, and he'd get his hand out and he'd go, shh, the old eagle. Never know where he's going to land. Never know when the eagle's going to land. And then he'd put it down on my leg and he'd squeeze it. I'd flip out because I'm really ticklish on my knee. Some people call that a cow bite. And that, for me, at least especially for Jen, it's the worst, and that's what I went for. I went for the cow bite. I went for the eagle, and it was not out of flirtation with my wife. It was out of anger because I was embarrassed. And I was thinking, why in the world am I being short with my wife right now? Why in the world would I reach out like that, lash out like that? Why would I do that? I don't normally do this. And it's because there's stuff going on under the surface that is being exposed by all of the stress that comes with the coronavirus and the quarantine. And what do we do now? There's extra stress, there's extra pressure, there's extra fear, there's extra anxiety that I haven't been working through. And this situation is exposing what's going on. And so when I notice something like that, I need to realize, oh my, I'm walking in the darkness. I need to do the hard work of maturity. In Galatians, Paul is talking about something very similar, and he says this, Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. He says, for freedom, Christ has set us free. Which I thought, that sounds really no duh. Right? He set us free to experience freedom. Well, yeah. Why would Paul even need to waste ink writing that? For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Here's the deal. It's like we were in a prison cell. An 8x8 prison cell, concrete walls, no windows, prison bars in front of us, and we were enslaved to sin, right? Sin owned us in every aspect. And then Jesus, by his death and his resurrection, he opened the door. And so we were able to walk into freedom. And what he says here, Paul is saying here, Jesus didn't die and raise again to set you free from the prison cell so that you'll just walk back in voluntarily, shut the door, and live in slavery. And that would seem silly, right? I mean, if you had just gotten free from prison, right, if you were just in prison for a number of years and you were free, finally free, the door opens, you walk out, you breathe the fresh air of freedom, and you just walk back in your slavery and you walk into the cell and you shut the door. It would be silly. No one would do that. And yet that's what we as followers of Jesus do all the time. He set us free from the sin of greed and pride and lust and anger and gossip and so on and so forth. He set us free, and yet we voluntarily walk back in the cell, shut the door, and live as those who are enslaved to these things, allowing them to have power over us. If you've ever wrestled with an addiction, like, you get this, you understand. Because at some point in time, whatever this sin is that's over your heart, it begins to get to a place where you can't make the right decision anymore. Like, you can't say no to pornography, or you can't say no to alcohol, you can't say no to whatever it is, drugs, whatever addiction is over your heart. You can't say no anymore, right? There's a point where you no longer have power. But we voluntarily continue to put ourselves in that spot. And Paul says, no. Christ set you free so that you would actually be free. So don't go back in the jail cell. Don't continue to submit yourself to a yoke of slavery. God has set you free. Don't walk back into prison. And now he goes on, he says, I want to explain to you some things that are going on so you can kind of be aware of when this is happening. He talks about the flesh and the spirit, and how the flesh and the spirit are against each other. Right? The flesh, is like your worldly broken desires, and the spirit is God's spirit inside of you, leading you what is good and what is beautiful and healthy. And he says this, Galatians chapter 5, verse 19, he says, now the works of the flesh, which he compares to the fruit of the spirit. So these are the things, the indicators. These are the things that you see on the surface that indicate that there's something deeper going on inside. He said, the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. Right? You have the works of the flesh and you have the fruit of the Spirit. And both of these things are indicators of what's actually going on inside. And I'm guessing that for many of you, as the stock market crashed, for many of you, as the virus numbers began to escalate, as laws of quarantine, began to be put into effect, and as more people in close quarters began to happen, and you weren't able to go do the things that you wanted, eat at the restaurants that you wanted, do things when you wanted, you began to see anger come out. You began to see jealousy come out. You began to see envy come out, greed come out, pride come out. And you're thinking, well, where's this coming from? Why am I so angry all the time? Why am I wrestling so much with trust and with money and with all this stuff? It's because this stuff was under the surface already. You just didn't know it because you had this insulator, and this situation has revealed, it's exposed what's actually going on in your heart. And we needed to do the hard work of allowing the Spirit of God to have his full effect, that we would be mature and complete, lacking nothing, that he would be able to get rid of the slaveries in our heart, even the tiniest little bit that's going on. Paul compares this with the fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5:22. He says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against these things, there's no law. And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Paul says, when we began to follow Jesus, we crucified the flesh, all of those desires. And then he talks about sowing to the Spirit and walking in step with the Spirit. So it's not just something that we do one time. It's something that we will continue to do, that we will continue to sow to the Spirit. We will continue to allow him to search through our hearts and our minds and reveal what's going on. This is good work. This is important work. What Paul is saying is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are indicators that you are connected to the vine, which is Jesus. We talk a lot about the rhythms of intimacy at LifePoint Church. Silence and solitude, prayer and fasting, meditation, memorization, study, celebration, community. All these different ways that God has given us to cultivate intimacy with him. And Jesus talks about it in John 15. He says, if you abide in the vine, if you abide in me, I'm going to produce fruit in you. And as we connect with God through the rhythms of intimacy, he begins to produce the fruit. That is an indicator that we are actually connected to the vine. So when you see patience come out, you can think, whoa, I've been connected to the vine. When you see joy come out, I've been connected to the vine. I've been connected to Jesus, and you can celebrate that. And in the same way, when you see anger come out, you can think, yikes, that's revealing there's something going on inside. Men and women, darkness, it's a petri dish for sin. Like walking around unaware of our sin, that's where sin grows and it flourishes. It loves the darkness. It loves it when it's not exposed to the light. But oftentimes, we just don't want to deal with it. Now, I'm going to share with you another story, and it is really embarrassing, but I'm going to share it with you. As many of you know who've been here for a while, I, a long time ago, had a tooth that fell out while I was teaching a message. I don't know if you know this. Yeah, I did. And here's what happened. It wasn't actually a tooth. It was a cap, a crown, or whatever that was. And about three and a half, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, I had this crown in my tooth that fell out when I was eating something hard. And I didn't really want to deal with it because it was annoying because, I didn't have time. There were different times in the last 4 years that financially that would have been a huge burden for us. I didn't want to deal with it because, frankly, at times I was afraid. I don't like going to the dentist, right? The zzz, and all the things that happen. And then, here's the deal. Right now, it's fine because I take my tooth out twice a day and I brush it and I brush up in there and I don't have any pain. And so right now, I don't have any cavities there. Right now, I don't need an implant. Right now, I don't need surgery. At least, I don't know. I might. I mean, there might be some serious infection and decay going on in there. I just don't know it. But as soon as I go to the dentist, you know what? I know it. And then I have to deal with it. Then I have to go through all the things. Maybe I have to get an implant. Maybe I have to have some sort of surgery. I don't know. But as long as I don't go, I'm fine. I can cope with it. I can cope with my tooth coming out, right? I can just put it back in place. I can just brush it twice a day. I can cope with it. But if there's something serious going on, I need to deal with it. And so I'm telling all of you that whenever this quarantine ends, I am going to deal with it. I'm going to actually deal with it because I need to deal with it. But I think a lot of times that's the way we are with our sin. We don't deal with it because it's inconvenient. We don't deal with it because it takes time. It takes emotional effort. We don't deal with it because we're afraid. It's a lot of the reason why many of us don't want to be alone in silence and solitude. Because wherever you go, there you are, right? You can leave people, and you can leave a situation, and you can leave a job, and you can leave a family, and you could leave, a friend group, and you could leave whatever, but you can't leave yourself. And when you're sitting there in silence and solitude, and it's just you and God, that's when he begins to do the work of exposing what's in your heart. And it's scary. It's hard. And it's not a one-time fix. God can do miracles, absolutely. And sometimes he heals miraculously in an instant when we pray. But a lot of times, what God likes to do is take us on a journey through difficulty so that we can be made whole, so that steadfastness can have its full effect, so that we won't just be instantly fixed, but we'll be mature and complete, lacking nothing. But there's another reason I think why we don't deal with our sin, and John talks about it. John 3:19 says this, and this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come into the light, lest his works be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God. Just a little time of honesty. Honesty with yourself. I think the reason that most of us don't like the light is because we love the darkness. We love our sin. Right? We have gotten our sin to a manageable place. Right? We can manage it. We can cope with it. It's not too big. It's not too bad. It's not owning my life. It's not taking me over. And you know what? Oh, it's fun. It feels so good. Doesn't sin feel good? Oh, I love to sin. I do. I love to sin. It's fun. Right? When you're indulging in lust, it's fun. When you're indulging in greed, it's fun. When you're just buying whatever you want, don't you love, what is it, retail therapy? It's so fun. It makes you feel good instantly. Don't you love, rather than dealing with your sin, to just kind of indulge it in ways that you can manage it? See, that's mostly why we don't want our sin exposed. It's why many of us are freaking out in this time when it's being exposed. Because we don't allow it to be. We love our sin, and so we don't deal with it. There was this story that I was told by this girl a number of years back. I don't think it's true, but I'm going to tell it anyways like she told it. If it's not true, it's fine. It doesn't change, the illustration. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, that's not real, it might not be. I found out later that she lied a lot, but that's okay. Anyway, here's the story she told. She had this sister, and her sister wanted a pet. And for some reason, her sister was she was unique, okay? We'll just say that because maybe some of you like this kind of pet, but she wanted a pet python. Snakes, I'm not a snake person. Not at all. I don't like snakes. And pythons, they're one of those kind that like to, wrap around their victims, strangle them and eat them. And so I just think, hey, I'd love to have a full-grown lion as my pet. I don't know. Anyway, so she had this python as her pet, and she loved it. Loved this python. So she, took care of it. She fed it, did everything she was supposed to do. But she was a little odd. She loved it a little too much, and so she liked to like touch it and hang out with it and like cuddle with it. And you think, cuddling with a snake? Maybe you do that. Maybe it's fine. I don't know. That's what she did. And then the oddest thing began to happen. As she would cuddle with the snake began to like become straight, not be wrap around her. The snake would like lay out long ways right next to her. And this continued to happen and happen. And she thought maybe there's something wrong with the snake. It stopped eating. And so she took it to the vet. And the vet said, you need to get rid of the snake immediately. She said, why? And the vet said, the snake is sizing you up so it can eat you. It wants to see if it's big enough to eat you. Now, I don't know that that's true. I don't know that pythons do that. But I know that sin does. That's exactly what sin does. Your sin that you're managing, your sin that you're coping with, it is sizing you up. Sin is not just something that we do. It's not just an action that we do in rebellion to God. Sin is this evil force that is controlled by the enemy, by the devil, and he hates you. He wants to destroy you. He wants to corrupt your life. He wants to blow it up. And he's not going to settle. He's not going to settle for you to just kind of play with sin. He's going to continue to own you and enslave you more and more so that he can destroy you. Your sin, whatever it is, your greed, your pride, your lust, your anger, your identity wrapped up in your job or your looks, your gossip, whatever it might be, your lack of trust in God, your sin is growing in the darkness and it is sizing you up because it wants to eat you, it wants to consume you, it wants to destroy you. And sometimes God does a beautiful thing of allowing circumstances that are difficult to expose our heart, to expose our sin. He does this as a gift. And we can think, oh, gee, thanks for exposing my sin. But no, it's actually a beautiful gift that he's given us to do the hard work that we need to do so that we can actually be free. We put all kinds of things off. We put our physical health off. We put our emotional health off. We put our mental health off. But many of us have put off the reckoning that will happen on the day when we die. the reckoning that will happen on the day when Jesus returns. And I tell you what, there's no better time than now to evaluate your life and say, and ask yourself, have I trusted Jesus as my Lord and Savior? Have I begun to follow in his footsteps? If not, now is the time to evaluate. Now is the time to deal with that. Now is the time. Because I don't know if we'll have it tomorrow. I don't know if I'll have it tomorrow. Now is the time to deal with that. Holly, do you have a question? No? Holly's back there and she raised her hand. I thought she might have had a question. But it's important that we deal with that. I think she was just saying amen. Amen. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through Jesus. There will be a day when Jesus separates the sheep and the goats, those who have followed him and those who haven't. And I tell you what, you want to be a part of the sheep, those who have followed Jesus. Now is the time to embrace him as your Lord and Savior. That's not where many of us are at LifePoint. Many of us are followers of Jesus, but what we have put off is our spiritual maturity. We've been willing to be adolescents in the faith. We've been willing to be teenagers in the faith. Maybe we've been willing to be young adults in the faith. But what Jesus wants is full maturity. He wants steadfastness to have its full effect so that we will be mature and complete, lacking nothing. This is an opportunity. Don't waste this opportunity. Where the enemy creates disaster, God sees an opportunity for maturity, for freedom, for life, for abundance. Let it have its full effect so that we mature and complete, lacking nothing. I love that our God won't settle for our mild completion, for our mild maturity, but instead for our full and complete. Allow it to have its full effect. Here's what I want us to do practically. Practically, what do we do? What do we do when Jesus, he exposes our sin? And what we see that oftentimes Jesus voluntarily entered into that kind of space when he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. He went to spaces where he could not that Jesus had any sin. He never had any sin, but he went to this place where he could have intimacy with the Spirit of God, and where we, following in his footsteps, enter in those spaces to have our sin exposed and deal with it, and then cultivate intimacy with God. So here's what we should do. First thing, pause throughout the day. We need more than ever times where we just stop for 1 minute, for 5 minutes, for 15 minutes. We pause and we encounter Christ. We intentionally engage intimately with him through the rhythms of intimacy. Secondly, be aware of your emotions. Become more aware of your emotions. What are you feeling? What are you experiencing? What's below the surface? Be aware of your emotions, and then have a place where you can write it down. We can't always deal with our emotions on the spot, but I have this note in my phone that when I experience some kind of big emotion, I write it down so that later I can evaluate it. And that's the fourth thing. Have strategic times where you evaluate your day, you evaluate your life, you evaluate your emotions and your mental capacity, you evaluate your spirituality, your connection with God, and you evaluate, am I displaying the works of the flesh or am I displaying the fruit of the Spirit? Celebrate the fruit of the Spirit, but allow the Spirit of God to do the deep, necessary work of exposing your sin and healing completely all that's going on underneath the surface. There is a big difference between coping and healing. I hope and I pray that all of us would be willing to not just cope with our sin, not just utilize coping strategies, but instead to actually deal with our sin. That we would use this time that's inconvenient, that's scary, to allow God to make us mature and complete, lacking nothing. I hope and I pray that we would press in deeper right now. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your word, your beautiful word, your scriptures. Thank you for your Spirit who's willing to abide in our hearts, even in the midst of the times that we don't listen and we run into sin and we allow it to grow. Lord, I pray that you would expose our sin during this time, that you would reveal to us where we've fallen short, where we're rebelling, where we're coping. And I pray that you would help us to do the hard, deep, difficult work that we need to do to allow your Spirit to have full reign of our hearts and our minds so that we can walk into maturity. God, we need you. This is hard. I pray that you would give us grace upon grace upon grace in this difficult time. We ask these things in Jesus' powerful name. Amen.